Welcome to another episode of African History 101. Today we look into the life of Morgan Tsvangirai, a man who stood up against Robert Mugabe's government. Morgan Tsvangirai was born on the 10th March 1952 in the Buhera area in then Southern Rhodesia. His father, Dzingirai-Chibwe Tsvangirai, was a communal farmer and mine worker. He was the eldest of 9 children. He completed his primary school at St. Mark's Goneso Primary School. He later attended secondary school education at Gokomere High School, but failed to attend university. He tried to make up for his lack of extended education by wide reading. He had a liking of political biographies, and his hero was Nelson Mandela, who was fighting the apartheid regime in the neighboring South Africa. In April 1972, he landed his first job as a trainee weaver for elastics and tapes textile factory in Mutayale. In 1974, an old schoolmate from Silveira encouraged Morgan to apply for an advertised job as an apprentice for Anglo-American Bindulas nickel mining in Mashonaland Central. He spent 10 years at the mine, rising from a plant operator to a plant supervisor. During this period, Morgan Tsvangirai married his first wife, Suzanne, in 1978, and the couple had 6 children. Upon Zimbabwean independence in 1980, Tsvangirai, who was then aged 28, joined the ascendant ZANU-PF party led by Robert Mugabe, who would later become his political rival. Tsvangirai began his union career as a union official, first as the vice president of Associated Mine Workers Union in the late 1980s, and he then served as the Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions from 1988 to 2000. He began disputing Mugabe's decision to implement economic structure adjustment programs that badly affected his union members. He was beaten up by Mugabe thugs. At this time, most spectacularly in 1997, when assailants tried to throw him out of a skyscraper window. However, they failed to intimidate him. By the second half of 1990s, he had become the formidable opponent of Mugabe and his ZANU-PF government. In 1997, Tsvangirai was part of the National Constitutional Assembly. The National Constitutional Assembly gathered individual Zimbabwean citizen civil organizations including labor movements, student and youth groups, women groups, churches, business groups, and human rights organizations. These individuals and groups formed the National Constitutional Assembly to campaign for constitutional reform after realizing that the political, social, and economic problems affecting Zimbabwe were mainly a result of defective Lancaster House Constitution and could only be resolved through a new and democratic constitution. Sensing that more could be done through a strong opposition, Tsvangirai and his friends found a political party known as Movement for Democratic Change in 1999. The MDC soon demonstrated its influence in February 2000 nationwide referendum. The party helped garner the necessary support to defeat the government's constitutional reform bill, which included clauses to extend President Robert Mugabe's rule and expropriate farms from white landowners. Mugabe's response was to immediately launch invasion of farms held by white landowners, both to assert his authority and to fulfill his life's dream of completed nationalism. However, this began the precipitous decline of the Zimbabwe's economy. As Mugabe became more repressive of dissent, Tsvangirai's star rose among young Zimbabweans and a darling of the West. In the June 2000 parliamentary elections, Tsvangirai's MDC provided one of the most serious opposition challenges in the country's history, winning almost as many seats as Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front, ZANU-PF, led by Robert Mugabe. Shortly before the presidential elections of 2002, in which Tsvangirai was a candidate, he was charged with treason for allegedly plotting to assassinate Mugabe. The allegations were based on what Tsvangirai said to his 40,000 supporters at a rally in Harare, that if Mugabe did not want to step down before the next election scheduled for 2002, we will remove you violently, he said at the rally. However, Tsvangirai said he was giving warning to President Mugabe to consider history. He was quoted saying, "There is a long line of dictators who have refused to go peacefully, and the people have removed them violently." The courts later dismissed the charges. Mugabe accused Tsvangirai of being a puppet of the West, a clone of Tony Blair, and fought his campaign on negative platform of avoiding the return of colonialism, with Tsvangirai as the frontman of the old powers. In 2002 presidential election, Tsvangirai lost, but there were widespread allegations of voter rigging. On March 11, 2007, Tsvangirai was the center of international attention after he was the victim of a brutal attack by the Zimbabwean police. While on his way to attend a prayer meeting arranged by local churches, Tsvangirai was seized, arrested, and beaten by the police. Other MDC officials were also beaten, imprisoned. Police officials claimed that the confrontation was instigated by MDC activists, but their version of events was not widely accepted. The Mugabe administration was subjected to much international criticism after images of injured parties circulated throughout the world. After recovering from the attack, Tsvangirai tried to maintain popularity with his supporters while also sorting out rival interests among MDC party members. Zimbabwe's presidential, parliamentary, and local elections were held on March 29, 2008. Unofficial preliminary results indicated a favorable outcome for Tsvangirai and his faction of the MDC, but as days passed with only a slow partial release of parliamentary results and the complete absence of presidential results, many feared that Mugabe and ZANU-PF were manipulating the outcome of the election in their favor. Tsvangirai's MDC released its own accounting of the presidential elections results on April 2nd, which indicated that Tsvangirai had captured slightly more than half the votes. The MDC's claims were dismissed by ZANU-PF. Later that day, official results indicated that Tsvangirai's MDC had won the most seats in the House of Assembly. Senate results announced several days later revealed a split between the MDC and the ZANU-PF, with the latter receiving only a slightly larger share of the votes. While the presidential elections were officially released on May 2nd, they showed that Tsvangirai had won 47.9% of the vote, compared with Mugabe's 43.2%. However, since he had not secured a majority of the votes, a runoff election would be held, which was later scheduled for June 27. In the weeks leading up to the runoff election, MDC supporters were harassed, attacked, some were murdered. Tsvangirai was repeatedly detained by the police, as well as several other MDC officials and supporters. The party's Secretary General, Tendai Biti, was arrested and charged with treason. Wary of the increasing level of violence and intimidation, on June 22nd, Tsvangirai announced that he would withdraw from the election, citing the impossibility of it being free and fair in the country's current political climate. Nevertheless, the election was still held. Mugabe was declared the winner, despite assertions from the independent observers that the election was neither free nor fair. The fact that the election was even held, as well as the outcome, prompted the widespread international condemnation, most notably from governments of African countries that had previously supported Mugabe, and they were cause of the MDC and ZANU-PF to form a power-sharing government. To that end, the Southern African Development Community (SADC) sponsored negotiations led by South African then-President Thabo Mbeki between Tsvangirai, Mugabe, and Mutambara. After several weeks of negotiation, the three Zimbabwean leaders signed a comprehensive power-sharing agreement, referred to as the Global Political Agreement. On September 15, 2008, as part of the agreement, Mugabe would remain president, but would cede some powers to Tsvangirai, who would serve as prime minister. Mutambara would serve as deputy prime minister. After becoming the prime minister, Tsvangirai failed to deliver on his promises. Mugabe continued his land-grabbing policies, hunger among the rural communities, which led him to lose the support of rural people. Furthermore, Mugabe continued sidelining Tsvangirai on important political appointments, including diplomats. This left Tsvangirai with a political position without power behind him. Tsvangirai lost his wife due to a road accident. The loss was a bitter blow to him, as his wife was said to be extremely popular with the MDC rank and file as a person of immense personal compassion. With his popularity dwindling, he failed to mount a serious challenge in 2013 election in which Mugabe retained total control of the country. Having resumed his role as the leader of opposition in 2013, Tsvangirai was powerless or unwilling to prevent the split that developed within the MDC. The weakening MDC was not therefore the standard bearer of revolt against Mugabe. That was left to informal civil society groups such as the Flag and, above all, the elements within ZANU-PF itself, as ambitious members began to seek out the succession from an ailing and aging president. Tsvangirai was facing same opposition to that of his nemesis of staying too long to the same position. In June 2016, Tsvangirai had announced that he had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing treatment. Over the following years, the condition of his health declined, and on 6 February 2018, it was announced that he was critically ill and in hospital in South Africa. He died 8 days later. At the time of his death, Robert Mugabe had been overthrown by a military coup. Morgan Tsvangirai's legacy is that he stood up to face Mugabe and his machinery of control and patronage. He was a David figure who, in the shadow of a Goliath, did not break and run. His immense courage as the first opposition leader of stature in Zimbabwean history will be forever a testament to him, but not his accomplishment as bewigged prime minister. So, do you think that Morgan Tsvangirai did the right thing to sign a deal with Robert Mugabe? Please leave your comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe for more African history.